because it shows that they can continue to advance their technology.
Does this new chip suggest Huawei has found a way to bypass US sanctions?
The impact of a lot of these restrictions have really promoted China to go develop its own technology that's competitive.
Today we talked to Dan Hutcheson, Vice Chair of TechInsights. Research firm has helped Bloomberg News dissect Huawei's Mate 60 Pro. Does this new chip mean Huawei has bypassed US sanctions? What do experts think if we compare Apple's new phone to Huawei's? Let's find out.
As we know, Apple is about to release this new iPhone 15 with major design changes. Given Huawei's new phone series, how might this impact Apple's position in the market?
Probably not significantly globally. It could potentially impact it in China. If you go back 5 years ago in 2019, Huawei was the second largest smartphone supplier. And they were between Samsung and Apple, and that was globally. And currently they're ranked 10th according to TechInsights. So they can certainly claw back some of this. In China, though, they're currently 6th, but it would only take 5 million more phones to put them in first place in China on a quarterly basis.
Given the recent calls from US lawmakers for further restrictions on technological sales to Chinese companies and some US National Security Advisor statement, should we expect a new round of US sanctions against China?
If you take away a market segment like access to the Chinese market, you essentially make it so that it's harder for American or European or Japanese companies to compete in the future because they're not getting that revenue, and that revenue pays for the R&D to continue to advance. And if you lose market share, ultimately you can't get it back. And so the impact of a lot of these restrictions have really promoted China to go develop its own technology that's competitive, that it can do to replace from the foreign companies. And so ultimately it does hurt them. And then the real question is do you get around the national security concerns, or hopefully China and US and its allies can come to a compromise where things come back, the world goes back to normal, and we go back to our normal trading environment. I actually worry that what we're seeing is an alignment of countries that are around China, whether it's India, Australia, Vietnam, Japan. They're beginning to align and surround China, which is just going to inflame China's fears. Play the game of Go, right?
What do you think the significance for the world and for China especially?
Well, I think the significance for China is really important because it shows that they can continue to advance their technology. This was a really marked improvement over what we'd seen before out of SMIC. And they're doing it without the most advanced tools, the most advanced EUV tools that could be available from internationally.
Does this new chip suggest Huawei has found a way to bypass US sanctions?
And in fact, the sanctions are still functioning. The sanctions were to keep China 2 generations behind, was to limit the technology that was available to 2 generations behind what was available in the West. But what had happened is that SMIC had fallen back to about 3 generations behind. And so what they've been able to do is close the gap back. So it shows that SMIC is operating a lot better now than they were 2 years ago.
不可能扼杀掉我们，因为这世界离不开我们，因为我们比较先进。
With this recent chip breakthrough, as like an expert in the tech field, do you anticipate some advancement in other areas from Huawei, like in the DUV, EUV, or other critical tech domains?
Possibly, but I predicted they were going to do this 2 years ago, and it was pretty predictable that they could do it, and it was just a matter of time and really engineering focus. The real surprise was that, what we'd seen, there'd been a lot of management disruption at SMIC in the last year or two, and there's been all this geopolitical stress. And so the question was would they be slowed down? And in fact, they weren't slowed down, and that's the real positive thing that's happened here. Well, China today is, they're buying about 20 to 25% of the world's equipment, and they account for about 15 to 20% of the world's semiconductor production. China is the region where a large part of all the assembly and packaging is done. So as we move into the chiplet world, it's an area where China has real strength going forward. In terms of the most advanced semiconductor manufacturing technology, China is 2 to 2.5 generations behind